Traditional pencil shading is a wonderful and unique art form where you can take the impression of a single tool, a pencil, and mimic the effects of sculpture, showcasing both space and form. In today's video, I'm excited to kind of draw you in and take you over my shoulder, if you will, to show you the process behind my botanical flower drawing. This is kind of a realistic flower drawing. It is a slow process. There's a lot to dive in and see here. And I'm excited to share some of my favorite tips and tricks for realistic pencil shading with you. Now at this point in the video, I've already completed the contour, which is the outline of the flower itself. If you need a little bit more help with that, I have it in a separate video, but I know a lot of you are just interested in the shading process, so I kind of separated this out. Just to reiterate some things, we kind of mapped it out with some big circular motions where I was just kind of figuring out where the petals were going to lay. Then I went in with a single line drawing across the whole thing. So we'll be diving in at this part where everything is already drawn out and ready to go. We'll just be diving into the shading process. If, as you're watching this video, you find yourself really hungry for more information, you're enjoying the process, then I know that you would love my pencil shading course. In this full shading course, I share a wealth of knowledge on pencil shading and drawing in such a way to capture the 3D form. We really dive into vocabulary, different pencils to use. We talk about the value scale, of course, different techniques for showing depth, and even just different ways to hold your pencil in order to capture it beautifully. But again, if you just find yourself longing for more information and ready to dive a lot deeper, I'll have all the information for my pencil shading course linked in the description box and probably pinned to the top comment. But that's not what we're here for right now, so let's dive into the shading process of this flower. Now, if you're looking at it and you're thinking, you know what, that looks different than the one that you showed us, it's because I accidentally, of all things, this is what happens when you are a work from home mama, is I was making tags for my kids' laundry baskets so that they could keep them straight and I could keep them straight. And instead of turning this paper around, I just grabbed it and cut it. And it wasn't until I was tying the tags on that I realized I had cut the bottom of this piece off. So I don't know, I thought about just doing that, but I ended up tracing it and it's fine. We're all fine and good. So for supplies, very similar to the previous videos, I've got a kneaded eraser, a white eraser, this Mono Zero, which is a very petite white eraser. I'm using an HB pencil lead as well as a B. So B is a little bit softer, so I'll get a little bit, I'm able to get those deeper values a little bit easier. And I'll probably bring in some sort of a blending tool, but for right now, I'm just gonna stick with these and see how far we can go. First, before I even begin, I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, and you can kind of pat like this and pick up some of that extra graphite, but I'm actually going to roll this along the surface. That will just allow everything to be much softer. Then I won't have those deeper outlines. Now I do like the deeper outlines if I'm just sticking with the contour. So with the contour, we need those deeper outlines to tell the story, to show us what we're looking at. But for shading, the outline isn't the story, it's the shadows. And so we're gonna lighten what we have in order to allow the shadows to shine. Allow our shading to actually do something. Okay, so while obviously now it's much more difficult to see, it will result in a better picture overall. I'm starting with the B. A little bit of a deeper pencil lead, so I'm able to get darker much faster than I normally do. And if you've never done any shading techniques, I highly recommend taking your reference image. You can do this on your phone, and you edit the photo and you switch it to black and white. That will help you to see the values much more clearly, and you're able to kind of cut out some of that color. So eliminating one of the elements or one of your senses helps the others to kind of hyper-focus. And so by eliminating the sense of color that you're getting with your sense of sight, but just some of that information that's coming in, you're able to better focus on what's going on. So we can focus on the values, which of course is what graphite does for us. And I'm just sticking with some of the deeper tones right now. So I'm going to come back in with some of the lighter values and kind of connect everything together. But to start, especially because this lead is a little bit deeper than what I'm used to working with, I'm just kind of going in, I'm finding those little shapes. I'm just going back and forth. You see how far back my hand is on my pencil? That allows me to work much lighter. So if you're finding that your pencil lines are very dark and you're just kind of scratching the surface of the paper, try moving back a little bit. It's an easy trick to give you a little bit more control, or a little bit less control, so that you're able to have those lighter values. Allow those darkest, deepest values to be very deep and keep those highlights. So this section is kind of a white triangle. I'm going to allow that to stay pretty white. In fact, I kind of snuck into it, so I'm going to take this eraser and kind of bring that out. Move slowly here. Okay, I'm gonna, since these are kind of lighter values, I'm gonna wait and blend that in with my other pencil. But this one's in hand, so I'm just gonna kind of move on. I'm not really doing like finishing a whole petal and then moving on. I'm going kind of in sections, and I'll be coming back to the next section. So we're gonna fill in this shape, going one shape at a time. Okay, I'm going to switch over. I feel like I'm getting really dark really fast, and I'd rather allow the foliage to be really dark and let this flower be a little lighter. So some of those shadows are deeper, but I feel like we're getting a little too heavy, too fast. So I'm going to switch to my HB pencil lead, which is a harder lead, so it's a little easier to have some of those softer values. Still kind of holding back on my pencil. It all usually comes together. We can lighten it with the kneaded eraser, or really go aggressive with the white eraser. But I've just found that if I'm having a little bit of trouble, sometimes switching that main element up really helps. I'm just going from one section to the other. So I've got this shape here, and I'm really trying to just carve out this shadow. Uh-oh, my baby hears me. I promise he's okay, he's with his daddy. Sometimes after a nap you just want mommy though. We'll see how he does. And pull in the B lid. just to deepen this. I want to be really careful not to scratch the paper. Back to HB, just kind of following this shadow. See how it has like this curve? Without adding these shadows in. See how that petal starts to come, it starts to take form because of the contrast. One thing that's really awesome, and we've talked about it before, but it's worth mentioning again, the great thing about botanicals and drawing from nature is that if you make a mistake, it's okay. It's supposed to be imperfect. Nature is imperfect, and honestly, that's part of what we love about it. That's why it's so interesting. So don't sweat the imperfections too much, I guess is what I'm saying. If you make a mistake, and you can see that how my contour differs. I mean, it certainly helps that not only is this a drawing of a photo, it's a drawing of a drawing of a photo. I should have worked from the photo again, but I didn't. And that is something that I know a lot of people disagree with me on, but I've just found if you really want to get better with your artwork, and you really want, like, just a lot better, like really improving, really taking your artwork to that next level, working from photographs instead of somebody else's artwork, I'm switching to a B now, is just such a game changer. You're solving the problems yourself. Not to say that there isn't a time to work off of like the masters, but just I think that people sometimes use it as a crutch. You know, and then with social media and stuff today, they're advertising their studies. If you're studying, let it be a study. But it can be too tempting, and it can get really, you can really get stuck there. And I've just found that you're able to tell kind of your own version of the story, and it's more interesting if you're working from your own voice. Well, now we're back to HB, just kind of getting these curves rounded out. I'm going to take this kneaded eraser, and you see I already have it kind of curved. I'm going to tap it off to the side just so it's kind of ready, and then tap it along the edge. Just a bit, and that'll help give it a little bit of a soft erase without taking out too much. One of the keys with shading is trying to get just this range of values in here. So just the subtleties, you're kind of trying to carve things out. So I've got this deeper section here, but it slowly gets lighter. But this section is all still darker than this section. But it's so subtle, and so it's just a lot of light layering kind of back and forth. I'm not quite there yet, but there's this part in the process where it starts to feel like a marriage between sculpting and drawing that I just find really fascinating and interesting. It's really the part where I'm like, oh, I love this. And I miss doing this, and it's so fun. Look at just that subtle change of deepening that a little bit. It just curves this petal. I don't know, it shapes it in such a way, and I'm not even done, but you can kind of see that part starting to take shape. Now see how these are all blending together? I'm going to need to add some more value in there, and so like some deeper values, and probably lighten some areas in order to help define where things are and what's going on. So to start, I think I can lighten this section here. And then I'm actually going to deepen it as well, deepen the same petal.
You have
okay.
one that can make a dark flower and a light flower.
Yes.
Well, probably when I get big and pop into that, I will learn how to do it.
When you get big and pop into a dad, you'll learn how to draw flowers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those kind of. Someone popping up on that picture.
What's popping up?
Those flowers.
I'm glad that they're popping up for you. All right, so you can see here that I'm kind of getting to some of these shadows, just more delicate differences in their petals, and I'm really starting to kind of build that up. Okay, so we've got just this deeper shadow. I'm really just going in very light layers. My pencil is really just kissing the paper. You can see here. This is kind of what I'm doing. So you can like hardly see that. And it's just layer after layer of this to really get those delicate shadows and just really define this shape. This is going to be tricky. I think we're going to have to kind of erase some of this, bring it up where I need it to be. Sometimes with these really light flowers, it's easier to go a little deeper and then just kind of lighten the whole thing up. It softens the whole effect and somehow works. These are almost the same. Through here, this petal comes up to a point here that has a shadow. And this section will be easier to kind of soften with the kneaded eraser in a moment, but for now I'm going to just go in the opposite direction. And then keep picking up my pencil to help, have it lighten as it goes out. See how this is now starting to pop up because we got that shadow underneath. Slowly working that in. But what I do want to avoid is, see that outline that I just drew? I don't want there to be a defined outline around anything. There are some exceptions, like little points that like to get lost. But in general, I don't want that to be there. So I'm going to continue to kind of work and try and hide that as I'm shading in the next petal. I want that to just, I want it to be a series of kind of shapes more than a series of lines. I'm going to switch to the B just because this is kind of a big section of that darker bit. I can see how I'm using the same amount of pressure, but much darker. I don't want to go to my darkest, even if I think it's going to be the darkest section. I usually don't like to start right at the darkest. You can always go a little bit darker in another layer, another pass through, but it can be hard to fix something that you've already royally messed up. One trick I've found, so for this exercise, I've been kind of thinking about it. I'm not going to use any blending tools. I think blending tools are fine, but I think there are ways to kind of get around it. And one of the ways that I have done it is by using the knead eraser. So I've just kind of scribbled over this whole section because it just wasn't soft enough. It wasn't blended the way I want it to be. So I'm going back and forth very lightly in different directions. So I went this way and I went this way. And so I've done all these different directions, and now I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, again, kind of in this kind of hooked, creepy finger technique, and I'm just going to tap to lighten up that section, and I'm just going in, again, kind of more small, tight layers, just to lighten that up the way I want it to be lifted ever so gently. The nice thing is, when you have like a section like this, you can see, if you take a peek at my kneaded eraser, how it gets dirty in this one spot. So I'm going to, every time I tap down on it, I'm going to pick up a little bit less graphite. So that will give me a softer pickup and kind of a blended look. So I don't have as many of like the pencil marks like I did before. And so I can go here just a touch, just to differentiate these two sections a little bit more, while still having it be nice and soft. So I'm redoing more of that as I kind of go along. So there are great blending tools. You can use a blending stub. You can use, I've used like a stiff paintbrush, like an acrylic paintbrush. I've really liked that. It's kind of that fine line between you need something super stiff and also very soft so it doesn't just scratch your paper. But I've had some good luck with that. And really, really loved the result overall. Our lighting has changed. It's getting ready to storm, so if things are kind of shifting in and out of warm and cool, that's just what it is in Michigan right now. Admittedly, in hindsight, this was probably not the best choice to choose for my first shaded piece after maternity leave, but I think it's fine because the light source is sort of coming from behind. It's coming from over here, but a little bit behind the rose. So it's kind of, you got kind of these interesting, it's not as obvious what's going on because the light source isn't as obvious. Working a little bit more from behind than as direct as it could be. So we're kind of dealing with that where like this petal is oddly lighter even though all the petals around it are kind of the darkest ones of the bunch. And this highlight that's here, it's like, where did that come from? Well, I know a lot of people who are able to kind of work, do a full petal, get all the details in that they need to, and then move on to the next one and finish that one completely and then move on to the next one. I have never been that way. I've never been that person. It's not a bad thing or a good thing even, but I don't know. I just find that I have to kind of bounce around a little bit more. I have to kind of feel my way through the piece, find where that value needs to be, how deep, how light. If I need to go darker so I can tell right here, you know, bouncing back and forth from this in my reference image, I need to go a little bit deeper in here just to kind of define that space. Now we're on day 2. It is the next day. I did decide to kind of go in and just kind of see. I wanted to add in kind of my deepest darks in here just to kind of get more of a gauge of where to go next. Now that I've had a little bit of time apart and I'm kind of looking at it, I want to tighten up a few areas and then I'll probably eventually go back in, deepen some sections, lighten some sections, but we're just going to kind of tidy up in here and then we're going to start in on the leaves. I have freshly sharpened my HB pencil Let's get that in here, and I'm going to zoom you in. We're just going to kind of tighten things up a little bit. So now that I have a nice point in here, I can really kind of get in here and deepen those areas that need just a little bit more attention. So just kind of cleaning up some things and just to kind of really get that nice and crisp. And I'm still working very light, but because I have a nice sharpened point, everything is going to get filled in nicely. So some of this texture in here, I'm not even sure if you can necessarily see it, but this texture, just these pencil lines, that's a lot of it is from the paper. That's just there until you start getting into blending. But one way you can get around it is with this nice sharpened pencil and kind of pressing everything in. Again, very gently. But it helps us to get some of that detail in here. I'm just going to go around a little bit, not a ton. Pull my reference image up, there we go. One thing I would love to know in the comment section below, if you could, let me know which format you prefer. If you like this style of video where it's kind of full time, you know, like it's real time where I'm showing you how slow I'm going or how fast I'm going, or when it's like sped up, if you prefer that, let me know, so I know how to format any future videos. Or, I mean, if this is even interesting to you. If you're watching to this point, I'm assuming it's at least a little bit interesting to you. But if you'd rather see kind of the tip videos than this more full tutorial, just let me know. So I'm excited about the leaves because not only I like a dark, deep leaf, so I think that'll be fun, but I'd like to show you kind of how I solved this problem where I didn't use the reference image, but I'm still going to use it as a guide. So we have a nice deep vein right down the center of the leaf. I kind of already have placed. And then I'm going to kind of just shade this section in because it'll be kind of in shadow, and I'm allowed this section to be a little bit more highlighted. Because again, our light source is kind of coming from this direction. And then I'm going to allow this to be in an even deeper shadow. I'm just almost making notes for myself. So we'll have a section that comes out. And again, I'm just looking at my reference image and I'm making sense of what I see and kind of trying to mimic the same idea on this leaf, some of the same patterns that I see. All right, I'm going to switch to the B, which we haven't sharpened. It looks about the same. And I'm going to start kind of going in here. I'm just going to go one section at a time. So just separating it with some of this veining. So this section, I'll be deeper down here and get a little bit lighter. This isn't a perfectly straight line, so I'm going to wiggle it a little bit. Now here I'm going to leave, let me zoom you in a little more. Now here I'm going to leave the slightest section where I don't color that in, don't fill that in, so it can serve as a highlight. I'm going to same here, where I'm going to move up, leaving this section highlighted just to kind of accent that vein. And again, just kind of focusing on what I see. And then eventually we'll get to the point where even maybe right here, the section next to the vein is a little bit darker. Alright, switching to my HB again, I'm just gonna deepen some of these sections. One of the downsides of working with the softer lead is it gets kind of that texture. It just gets a little muddy a little faster, where if you have the harder lead, it's easier to have a nice, tight, kind of smooth, shaded area. All right, for that, I'm pretty happy. I'm gonna fill this in real quick. I'm gonna make this a little shorter. We're going to concentrate this shadow underneath here, because that's where it would be the darkest. And allow it to kind of lighten up here over this edge. Since I want the leaves to read darker than the petals, I'm actually going to go over the whole thing ever so lightly. Just so that even our highlight is just starting at a deeper point. Okay, so in this corner, I'm going to deepen that a little bit, coming towards the center. If you want something to be darker value overall, you really have to build up slowly, or else it quickly becomes just this mass. Similar to kind of this stem, it reads darker than these petals up here, but I still want to show that there's a shape under here, that there's some dimension. And so even though I'm getting very dark, I have these highlights and there's still this gradient within here of value. Just kind of working slowly and building it up and taking away and building it back up and taking away, and just kind of, yeah, just kind of working on it. Especially because I'm not exactly working off of a reference image for this. I have kind of a guide. It's not quite the same. So I need to go slowly to build it up. Although at this point, I think I've been kind of fussing with this one enough. I think it's about time for me to just move on, and then we'll come back and fix it so that it kind of matches the rest of the leaves that we have. So we have enough of an idea of where we're going that I think we can kind of move forward. think that's starting to read pretty well. I think I'm going to deepen this one, mimic this section a little bit more. And again, I think I'm going to end up going back through here and deepening this just a bit. Let's see if this section is all supposed to be in shadow. Let's just deepen the whole thing. And we'll deepen across here a bit more. And I'm just I'm fine tuning by I'm stepping back. I'm seeing things that aren't quite working. I feel like some of this veining is just a little too strong for my preference. So again, I'm gonna go through here and just kind of go across the whole thing to soften it. Not enough to really make it too deep and dark, but just to knock it all down a bit so that it's not quite, there's not quite as much noise going on. Even here, I want there to be some definition, but not too much of a pop. All right, I think that's working really well, and I'm excited to kind of apply it up here. It is a new day once again, and I'm kind of following some of my favorite tips for trying to find out if this is done. I have a full video on it. I'll kind of go over it briefly, but if you want to see more, hear more about these techniques and kind of why they work or why I do them, I'll have that video linked down below. But I took a break from it. Obviously, I went to bed last night and I woke up. It's a new day. Made sure that I have had enough to eat and I'm not just grumpy. I've also looked at it in the mirror. I've returned to my reference photo. We've done all the things. So now I'm just kind of fine tuning everything. And again, as I'm shading, I'm just barely kissing the paper. Kind of like if you were petting the whiskers of a sleeping kitten or something. That's how hard I'm pressing. So not hard at all. We're just being very gentle. We're trying not to kind of disrupt the surface that we already have down. Just get things so that they read correctly. Now, could it use some tweaking still? Probably, but you know what? I'm really happy with it and I am ready to move on to another drawing. I hope that you enjoyed this process. Again, if you like this video style, let me know in the comment section down below, or if you'd prefer just kind of a time-lapse drawing video, we can do that as well. And until next time, happy drawing. Wow, this is gonna be a mess to edit.